And do you want to give people 1 more minute, or do you want to go ahead?
I think so. That sounds good.
I can barely hear Carrie. Are we supposed to hear her?
In a minute, yes, but I was just being
Okay.
quiet.
Thank you, Jackie, though. We were talking earlier. It was an inside joke because I guess I have a better microphone than she does.
Clearly.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a few seconds. Once you get settled in, if you'll make sure your microphone is muted, and then use the chat to tell us about where you teach and what subjects you teach. Welcome, 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 everyone. We're going to get started here in just a few more seconds. I see that we've got some folks getting logged in. Once you're in and settled in the Zoom, go ahead and use the chat to tell us about what subjects you teach and where you teach. Awesome. Well, Carrie, I think maybe now's a good time to get started.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to Not Your Average PD. This is Creating, Not Copying, teaching students to use AI tools ethically. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. My name is Carrie Horton. I'm the program manager for the Keenan Fellows Program for Teacher Leadership. We're a nonprofit organization based out of NC State University in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we've been investing in educators across the state of North Carolina for 25 years. We now have over 600 alumni who are amazing educators with a multitude of talents. Not Your Average PD is just one way we tap into this amazing network of talent to bring professional development to educators by educators. If you want to learn more about our programming, you can visit our website at keenanfellows.org, and I'm going to paste that in the chat if I can figure out how to use my mouse here.
Oh.
Tonight we have an amazing educator, Keenan Fellow alumni Paul Cancellieri, sharing his work with us. Paul teaches middle school science in Wake County, North Carolina, and he's the author of several books, including his most recent publication, 50 AI Prompts for Teachers, A Guide to Artificial Intelligence in Education, which offers practical strategies for K-12 teachers. A 2012 Keenan Fellow and part of the Keenan Fellows faculty, Paul delivers dynamic professional development to K-12 educators in North Carolina. I am lucky to call him a colleague and a friend, and we're honored that he is here with us tonight to share his experiences. So welcome everyone, and welcome Paul. Please share your experience and expertise with us.
Thanks, Carrie. I am really, really glad to be here. So just a couple bits of housekeeping as we get started here. As you get settled into the Zoom chat, if you'll make sure that your microphone is muted, and then if you'll drop into the chat just a quick message and let us know what subjects you teach and where you teach. So far, we've got respondents from all over North Carolina and a little bit of Colorado even. That's fantastic. So I'm going to kick things off here. As Carrie mentioned, I am a Keenan Fellow. I had my fellowship in the 2011-2012 school year. I have since been lucky to call myself an active member of the Keenan Fellows Network, and I see many familiar Keenan Fellows here in the audience. As Carrie mentioned, this is one of our most exciting ways for alumni to kind of give back, and so we try to share our expertise with the largest group possible, and it is a lot of fun. And so I hope you're ready for some interaction and to learn some great things and share some of what you know with all of us. So the first thing I'd like you to do, because we're talking about AI today, is to use the chat in either an emoji or a word that represents how you feel, how you think about students using AI in your classroom. So when you think about students using AI, how does that make you feel? Go ahead and drop an emoji or a word into the chat and let us know how you feel about it. I see quite the range of emotions. pretty much matches up with what I've seen and heard from many others. I appreciate that many of you are using emojis that I didn't even know existed. So that's fantastic. So go ahead and drop in an emoji that tells us how you feel when you think about students using AI. So I see what looks like a wide range of emotions that go from frustration to concern to excitement, and that's exactly how most teachers that I talk to feel about AI when it comes to students using it. There's lots of good, there's lots of bad, and it's a hard thing for us to navigate. So our goal today, as you'll see in just a minute, is going to be to kind of navigate those waters together and see if we can't come out on the other side with some information that'll help us all feel more positive about it. So I'm going to start with a quote here that comes to us from Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. This is just one example of what lots of business people say when they talk about the importance of AI. They recognize the value that it has for their business, but they also see that it has the potential to be a positive or a negative force in society. And so, just like Tim Cook, I think that we need to make sure that we are using AI in a way that makes humanity better, not by taking its place, not by replacing humans, but by helping humans do even more with our time and our energy. And so the question that kind of drives everything we're going to be talking about tonight is, why is it that students need to learn AI? Because that's a question that's not necessarily obvious for all of us to consider. But here are some things I'd like you to think about. First of all, we know that this technology is going to be a part of their lives in the future. We know that it's a really powerful tool that comes in a lot of forms. And we know that students are likely going to have to interact with AI as they go off into their professional careers and lives. So turning our back on it is not helping them at all. It's also true that it can augment the ability of people to read, to write, to create computer code. And so in this way, it becomes a value added kind of thing. It can add in a whole lot of extra abilities to the creativity and the skills that humans already have. And we owe it to our students to give them access to those extra abilities. It's also true that in a recent survey, 71% of business leaders said that they would rather hire someone who had less work experience but had more AI knowledge. And so if we're thinking about our students and the jobs and experiences they're going to have after they leave our classrooms, we are truly doing them a disservice if we don't teach them the right ways to use AI. So then, what can go wrong if students use AI? I think most of us are familiar with some or all of these potential pitfalls. We've probably even experienced them in our own classrooms, especially those of us that teach middle and high school. First of all, and maybe most common, there's the idea of students plagiarizing work that AI has created and submitting AI-generated work as if it was their own. But we also can't overlook the fact that AI chatbots, AI models produce content that is inherently biased. Now, most of that bias comes from the fact that they're trained on information that is inherently biased, information from all over the internet. So they're going to perpetuate and in some cases amplify those biases. And students being exposed to those biases are a bad thing that we have to definitely deal with and address. There's also the concern that students may over-rely on AI for support, and that may hinder their research that shows that students who use AI too much in place of their own learning with too much support end up not learning what they're supposed to, not building those skills that help them to be successful later on. And of course, with any technology, there are concerns that what goes in might not stay in a private place. So information that students share, even just in the form of a prompt that they ask a chatbot, that information may be used in ways that are unethical or that might violate or put at risk their privacy and their identity. So here are the three goals that I have for us over the rest of this session. First, I want to make sure that we're all comfortable and familiar with some of the great potential that AI has for our students. Second, I'm going to help us talk about some ways that we can establish a culture of positive AI use through the development of norms that help our students make the right decisions when it comes to AI. And finally, I want you to leave with some practical suggestions for ways that you can use AI with students in your classroom when you're ready. Ideas for activities, lessons, and tools that you can use with your students so that they're going to gain that practical know-how and that experience that's going to lead them to be way more successful and to understand why it's important that they use these tools in ways that are authentic and ethical. So we've gotten to a point when it comes to AI that most of us have played around with it. I imagine that most of you in the audience tonight have used an AI chatbot at some time. If not, that's perfectly okay. But I want to ask you to share with us what you see as some of the things that AI can do well and the things it doesn't do well. So use the chat and tell us an example of something that you know that AI can do well, either for adults or for students, some task or support that it can provide. And feel free to share some of the opposite, things that you know AI struggles with or things that it can't do very well. So we'll take a minute and let you guys share those ideas here in the chat. Jackie mentioned summarizing. I think summarizing is one of the most powerful things AI does. Keeping you from having to read every word necessarily, but getting the gist of what you're reading. It can really help you to better select the things that you do want to dive into and read in detail. Tracy, I'm flattered that you mentioned my book. I do appreciate that. And I do know that you're right. Of course, AI can help us a lot with our lesson planning. John, thanks for mentioning code. We know that AI can write code, but of course, that also means it's pretty good at looking at code that's written by humans and helping you figure out where it's broken or where it might need to be streamlined. Michael, thanks for mentioning worksheets too. Creating content is something that a lot of teachers don't realize that chatbots can do for them. Rob, I appreciate you bringing up the idea of image generation because that is one of the newer features that a lot of these chatbots have. And Courtney, I like the way you phrased it, clarifying text, making it easier to understand, which is important for us adults as well as our students, right? Susan, I think I have written a lot better email since I started relying on AI to help me. Because there's that angry email that you know you're not supposed to send. And usually I would just have left it in my drafts for a few hours and come back to it. But it's even better to feed it to an AI and have the AI help you make it a little less emotional. Awesome. As Colby points out, you can even use it to write the letters you do want to write to those angry parents, but still keep your job, right? These are fantastic ideas, and I appreciate you guys sharing them. On the side of things that it struggles with, I see that Giselle mentioned that fact checking can be a struggle, which obviously is definitely true. And I think that some of the other things we'll get into here in just a minute, but I love these ideas and feel free to keep those ideas coming in the chat so that we can all benefit from thinking about them in this way. So here are some of the pros and cons that I'd like to point out. Some of them overlap with things that you all have already shared, and some of them are a little bit different. On the strength side, we know that when it comes to working with text, that's really the strength of these AI models like ChatGPT. When it comes to writing text, that's something that they're really, really strong at. Modifying text, as you guys pointed out, by summarizing or translating or rewriting. And this is a place where a lot of folks don't use it enough. It can be really good at reading documents. So if you are looking for something, searching even, you can use AI to help you do that really, really well. And they can even read images in many cases. On the flip side, and again, as many of you pointed out, there is the issue of misinformation, and we'll talk a little bit about why that happens. But the AI chatbots have training that comes from old information that has not been fact-checked. And many of the current models of chatbots also have the ability to perform internet searches so that they can pull more current information that might be in the form of like a Google search or a search through Bing. They also don't know about the context unless you tell them. So sometimes the suggestions they give you don't work because they don't know everything that you know about a situation or a task. As we mentioned earlier, there are embedded biases that can sometimes come out. As just an example, about a week ago, I was working with a group and I As part of an exercise, we asked one of the chatbots that can generate images to make an image of a seventh grader. And it produced an image of a Caucasian boy, blonde haired, blue eyed. And when I came back and said, okay, can you give me a more diverse student? The response was to put him in different clothing. So clearly, there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to the biases that we see that are built into these systems. And then, as mentioned earlier, what gets done with the data that is coming into these models is also of great concern. At this point, it's not really safe to put any kind of personal identifying information into most of these models because that information can be used by the companies that make them in a variety of ways that we don't really have any control over. So the other thing that I think is really important for us to recognize is that the ideal use of AI by an adult is not the same as the ideal use of AI by a student. So when adults use AI, our goal is to offload some of the work that we would normally do to an AI. There's really nothing an AI can do that we couldn't do if we had time and access to information. The AI is simply saving us time by doing work for us. But if we look at what we want students to do with AI, it's not the same. We don't want them to offload their work to the AI because the work is how they learn. The work is what they're there to do in school. Instead, our ideal situation is for the AI to provide just the right amount of support. And we'll talk more about that later on. But like the ideal AI tutor is not going to give the answer to the child. Instead, it's going to help the child find the answer themselves. So in recognizing how we use AI differently from how students use it, we come to this understanding that we need AI in our classrooms to enhance learning, not replace thinking. Because if students are using AI to replace thinking, then it's not only going to slow them down, it may actually cause them to lose some of the learning that they may have already had. So let's create together sort of a list of what we think of as some of the most ethical ways that students can use AI. And we'll start with some of the ones that mirror what you all said about how you use AI yourselves. So brainstorming. I use AI with my students sometimes when they're working on projects as a brainstorming tool because I think it really levels the playing field. I have a lot of students who are reluctant to start a project because they feel like they don't have good ideas. Once they get a good idea, they're able to run with it and create amazing things. But using AI as a partner in the brainstorming process can really unlock a lot of things, and it can make students feel more confident in their own learning. AI can also be used to help students draft initial versions of their work. And then they can go to work taking those drafts that were created in partnership with the AI and making their own changes to them to make them their own, changing the voice, changing the word choice, fact checking it. This is one ethical use of AI under the right circumstances. And then we could also do the opposite, where the student creates the initial draft and they rely on the AI to give them feedback that can help them improve it. In this way, the AI is acting a lot like a teacher would, right? If you had the time, if there are 100 of you in your classroom, you could read every student's draft in a prompt and quick manner and give them quick feedback. Then they could go back and make some changes before they submit their final work. This can be a really important and most of the time ethical use of AI for students as well. Many folks use AI to do translation. And in the early days of ChatGPT a year or two ago, this was less reliable. But the current slate of models have gotten to be a lot better at translating into most languages, to the point where a lot of folks I know, including students, will use an AI tool to translate instead of using a tool like Google Translate. Although, as I understand it, Google Translate uses a lot of AI behind the scenes anyway. And finally, as was mentioned earlier, one thing that many of these AI tools excel at is writing computer code. And that might mean a partner for students who are working on coding, or it might allow a student who wants to create something but doesn't know how to code to get the support that they need to take their idea, their dream, and turn it into some kind of computer program. So these are the good things that students can do with AI under the right circumstances. But let's also look at the flip side of this coin. Let's talk about some of the ways that AI can be used by students that doesn't help their learning and would definitely be considered unethical. First, if a student has an AI write an entire assignment for them, right? Obviously, this is not helping them learn. They're not getting practice with the skills. And on top of that, it's giving the teacher the impression that they've learned things they haven't. This is maybe the most frustrating thing that students do with AI from a teacher's perspective, because it really messes with our sense of our jobs and what we're able to do. But it's also true that anytime we give critical practice assignments to our students, where we want them to practice something so they learn how to do it better, if they automate that practice with the help of AI, they're missing out on that important practice. So, for example, if we're teaching a math skill and a student takes their math problems to an online tool that uses AI to solve it for them, they're not just turning in work that's not theirs, they're also skipping out on the practice that they need to learn the skills that are required. When it comes to doing research, students can use AI to help them with research, but because of the way AI is not fact-checked, frequently the research that they're doing is going to generate information that's just not true. And that's going to hurt them when it comes to them synthesizing their research into some conclusions, because if the underlying information is not accurate, that can be a real problem. And the creation of images, as you may have heard, deep fakes and the creation of these fake nude images even can be a very harmful thing that's happening in a lot of schools around the country right now, where students get access to image generation tools and they're able to make really harmful images with them. Finally, any process that a student is supposed to show the teacher they know how to do, if they outsource that process, whatever it happens to be, whether it be the creation of something or the thinking or the analysis of something, if that process gets outsourced to the AI, then that's going to be an unethical use of AI, because the student is not going to get the practice they need, but more importantly, the teacher's not going to know what they're able to do. Now, I share all this partly because a recent survey showed that 53% of college students say that they're using AI to cheat, and that it's actually probably much higher than that, but that's the number that's self-reported. But if you ask college instructors how many of their students are cheating with AI, the number is much lower. They say 26%. Now, those survey results, of course, are survey results, and they can change depending on who you ask. But there's clearly a gulf, a gap here between what students are doing and what their teachers think they're doing. So from all this, it's important that we take a step back and weigh the pros versus the cons. So I'd like you guys in the chat, if you would, to just consider, with all of these possible pitfalls weighed against the possible potential good that AI tools can provide, use the chat to tell us, do you think it's worth it? Do you think that students should be using and learning how to use AI in school, or do you think it's not worth it? And you can use any symbol you want to tell us, or just words if you'd like, to tell us whether or not you think that with the potential dangers, teaching students how to use AI in school is worth it. All right, I appreciate all these positive messages. And Susan, I'll answer your question real quickly while we're waiting for these responses to come in. Yes, most AI tools like ChatGPT, if you copy and paste or upload an example of some text, it can give you an estimate of the Lexile score. And it can generate text at a particular Lexile level. So it sounds like we are pretty much in consensus here, if not all agreeing that using AI with our students is something that we have to do, that we should be doing. And I'm really glad you said that, because otherwise this would be a very short webinar. So let's start by talking about what we can do about these problems, okay? But actually, you know what? Before we talk about what we can do, I think it's really important that we take a moment to talk about what we can't do. Because as many of you probably have heard and may even know firsthand, there are some things when it comes to policing AI use that are just not possible. And I think we need to recognize these limitations from the beginning before we start talking about what we can do to help our students learn better. So first of all, and this is just one of those things, as my students say, You just have to end the sentence with a period, okay? We cannot reliably detect AI generated content. It's just not possible. Any company or tool that tries to tell you that they can detect AI reliably is lying to you. It cannot happen. And I personally don't think it will ever happen because of the nature of AI generated content. It is usually random somewhat and it is novel. There's not a set fingerprint or trace that tells a tool that AI has generated something. You may have heard some of the horror stories where students uploaded teacher generated material and asked AI if it was generated by them, and the AI said yes. Where somebody took something that ChatGPT had just created and gave it back to ChatGPT and said, is this AI generated? And it said no. We can all think and probably have heard of dozens of these examples, but the bottom line is you cannot rely on an AI detector to tell you when students are using AI, period. Second, and this has always been true, but sometimes we need a quick reminder, we have no control over what our students do outside of our classrooms. So you can set rules, you can set norms, you can have honor codes, but in the end, if our job is to measure student learning and teach students, we need to know what our students know. And when they step out of our classrooms, we can never be sure. We can never know for sure what's been done and what's been used to make the things they turn in. And lastly, this is something I know to be true myself, and I suspect many of you have seen firsthand. We cannot rely on consequences alone to motivate our students. It doesn't matter how big the stick is, sticks alone are not going to stop our students from using these tools. And that's mainly because from their perspective, if this tool is going to help them reach their goal more easily or more quickly, then it only makes sense for them to use it. Our job is to make them understand why it doesn't help them achieve their goals. And that means helping them to see that their goals and our goals are better aligned than they realize. So let's start here by talking about one of the big topics for tonight, which is how do we set norms for our classrooms and our learning spaces that allow for positive AI use? So we're going to go into these three ideas in detail, but I just want to lay them out at the outset here. First, you need to have a policy for AI use in your classroom, and you need to explicitly teach it. That means you need to show your students what they're supposed to do and make sure they understand. This is just like any other classroom behavior. We need to make sure that our students understand what it is they're allowed to do. Second, you need to promote integrity and human authorship. This means we need to celebrate and make a big deal out of the work that our students do that we know they've done so that they understand why that's so important. And lastly, we need to teach our students how AI works and how they can use it. Because if we don't do that, then it's always going to be that taboo, and we know how teenagers are drawn to taboo. So we have to turn it into a positive where we lead the way instead of trying to chase after it. So let's take a look at the first one, AI policies. Now, I'll say right off the bat that you may not have full control over the AI policy in your classroom, right? About half the states in the country have AI guidelines that they've released, including North Carolina. And then every district that I've spoken with is either working on an AI policy or already has drafted one. So your district has a policy. And then at the school level, oftentimes there are rules that are enforced in your classroom when it comes to what's allowed and what's not allowed. But regardless of where the rules come from, it is super important that we teach those rules in a concise and clear way to our students. So we need to make sure that our students understand for every assignment, every task we give them, if AI is allowed and in what way it's allowed. All of the teachers who've gotten into trouble because a student used AI when they weren't supposed to, but then later on, they were told that the student did that because they didn't know they weren't supposed to do that. Now, we can argue all day long whether the students knew, but the best way to make sure that your students know what they're allowed to do is to clearly communicate that and do so in a way where it's public. Second, once you've got this set of expectations that you teach to your students, you need to enforce the rules consistently and fairly. If you don't know for sure that AI was used, you have to give the students the benefit of the doubt, and create in your classroom the conditions under which it simply can't be used in situations that are high stakes. And one of the best ways that you can get students using AI successfully and ethically is create a system where students have a way to document their AI use. Many students that I've worked with and talked to are worried when they use AI because they don't want to get in trouble. Even the good kids don't want to get in trouble for using it in ways that are not allowed. And so if you create a nice, clear way for students to be encouraged to use it in a positive way, you can then create for them a system where they can document what they did and what the AI chatbot did. So let me show you one example that some of you may be familiar with. This comes to us from an Australian researcher. His name is Leon Furs. It's called the AI Assessment Scale, and versions of it have been adopted by districts all over the country. Basically, it's just a way to talk about the different options for how AI is allowed to be used by students. I use, a version of this in my classroom, and I teach it to my students. And I teach 8th grade, so older middle schoolers, who are old enough to be allowed to use these AI tools legally because they're 13 or older. When I use AI with my students, they know which of these levels is the appropriate level. Now, I understand the text is a little bit small on the screen. I think that there's a link to this document that I'll share with you all in just a little bit. But I'd like to focus on just the titles for now. So no AI, that's pretty easy, right? There's going to be plenty of situations where students are not allowed to use AI at all. For example, when you're giving them a test or assessment, or when you want to get the most accurate and honest look at what they're able to do. So that's the no AI level. The second level, which is called no planning. Thank you for sharing that, Carrie. The second level, AI planning, is where students are allowed to get AI help brainstorming. But once they have an idea, they then have to create all the content around that idea on their own. The third option, AI collaboration, is where students use the AI to get feedback on the work that they've created or to create some of the content. But there's usually restrictions on how much of the content that students turn in can be generated by AI. In my classroom, our rule of thumb is 20%. 80% yours, 20% AI, or less AI is perfectly okay. So that when students get content from an AI chatbot, they're required to change it and customize it and make it their own before they submit it. Level 4, full AI, is where they're allowed to use the AI any way they want to. Now, this may sound like crazy, like, Paul, in what world do I want students using AI in a completely unfettered way? Well, the truth is that there are times where the AI can be a great learning partner for them when they're just exploring a new topic or looking for information. Maybe they're doing research. Maybe we're introducing a new topic and they have questions. They want to have some way to ask those questions. Those are situations where it may make sense for them to have sort of full AI use. Now, Leon's level 5, AI exploration, is one that I never really use. But with AI exploration, the teachers and the students and the AI work together like 3 partners to look at how the AI tools work and to use them in ways that kind of explore. So it's the kind of thing you probably wouldn't do all that often, but it's really all about learning how to use AI alongside your students. So once your students have learned about these levels, you have a way that you can give them an assignment and tell them what level to work at. And you'd be amazed how much help it provides for them just to have a framework for what they're allowed to do. If I tell my students this assignment, we're working at level 2, you can get brainstorming help from AI, but that's it. The number of students that go too far and use the AI too much shrinks because they know there's a clear line. They know how much is allowed and how much is not. And they know that if I find out down the road that they did more than they were supposed to, that they could lose points for that. But more importantly, we're going into this with a positive attitude. It's not that I'm saying AI is bad or that I don't want them to do it. I'm showing them that I understand the power that it has to be a help to them, and I want them to use it in a positive way. So I'd like us to pause for just a minute now. And in the chat, I'd love for you all to tell me, now that you've learned about these different levels, or many of you may have learned about them before, Is there a level here that you think you'll probably use the most with your own students? So is there an amount of AI that you think is like that sweet spot for you and your students? And if there's more than one level, feel free to tell us. I see a lot of folks settling in that 2 or 3 area in the middle. And I think that makes a lot of sense. That's definitely where most of my assignments fall. One thing I'll point out is that this system has forced me to now start labeling every assignment, even the ones where I think it's obvious that you're not allowed to use AI. My students will say to me, Mr. C, you didn't put an AI level on this one. Are we allowed to use AI at all? And they'll be in the middle of taking a paper and pencil test. They don't even have computers out. I'll say, no, this is an AI level 1, guys. We're not using AI here. But just the fact that we're having these conversations and that they feel comfortable, using that language, I think is a really positive thing. Sandra, I really appreciate you pointing out that that language assistance is a really powerful thing. I've got a couple of MLs, multilingual students, who don't speak very much English. And for them, having the AI sort of available to help them has been really great. It sort of bridges the gap between translation and academic support. They've really enjoyed it. Great. So it sounds like we're in that sort of middle ground, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense to me as well. So let's talk about the next step. As I mentioned earlier, once you have established really clear expectations, it's important that throughout the work you do, you make sure that students understand that the AI is there to help them, but at its core, what their job is to do is to author their own work. And your job is to give them feedback on that work so that they can get better at the things that they need to learn to be successful at the next educational level or their career or their lives. And so this idea of promoting human authorship is, I think, really at the core of what it takes to make a positive AI culture in your classroom. So number one, I make sure that my students understand what we've already talked about, that adult uses of AI are different from what it takes for students. I even give my students a little intro to educational psychology. We talk about the zone of proximal development. The idea that if the challenge is at just the right level ahead of them, that's when their learning is going to increase the fastest. I had a student of mine who likes to run in track say that her favorite running partner is the one who runs just a little bit faster than her, because if somebody runs a lot faster than you, then you let them run away because you can't keep up with them. But if your partner runs just a little bit faster than you, then they're constantly pushing you to make yourself just a little bit faster. And I told her I love that idea so much that I'm going to share it with everybody I talk to about this. So here we go. That's the zone of proximal development, right? They need to be learning in a level, at a challenge level that's just beyond where they are so that it's reachable, but it requires some effort. That's something that AI can do when it's prompted properly. But of course, AI can just do the work for you, and then you're not learning anything. One example I use with my students, and I'll share this with you all a little bit later, is the idea that if you were a professional runner and you had a coach that you had hired to help you get better at running, I feel like I'm using running a lot here, but it's an easy example during this week that my students are all trying out for the track team at school. If you're a professional runner and you hire a coach and that coach says to you, okay, here are some exercises I want you to do over the next week, and then we're going to come back together and we'll see how much faster you are. If you had decided not to do those exercises, but just paid somebody else to do them for you, you're not going to become a faster runner, right? And I think when we use language like that, students see that they're not helping anyone when they let the AI do the work for them. Second, it's important that when students are allowed to use AI, that they have a way to document the way they're using it. So this means creating a way for them to cite or give credit to the work that they've done versus the work that the AI has done. In a few minutes, I'm going to share with you an example of a document that my students use to do this. And you'll be able to take it and adjust it to meet your needs or use it as a springboard for your own creation of these kinds of documents as well. I also use this opportunity to talk about academic integrity. I want them to understand that when they go to high school or college or out into the workplace, that it's a serious thing to submit work that you didn't create and to take credit for that work, whether it be the work of another person or the work of an AI. The way we build trust with our colleagues and with our leaders is by being honest about things like authorship. And then lastly, and this is the easiest one, is when your student uses AI in the way that they're supposed to, you make a big deal out of it. If my students turn in work that's awesome that I know they made without AI, we put that up on the wall and we talk about how amazing it is. And when they use AI to help them and they tell me about that, we celebrate that as well. Because then they understand that there's nothing to hide from here. It's worth coming clean about your use of AI because you're going to find yourself, celebrated for your use of it. All right, we're going to keep things moving here. The last step when it comes to promoting this positive use in your classroom is to build AI literacy, because we want our students, as you guys pointed out in the chat, we want our students to leave our classrooms knowing how to use AI successfully because it's going to be part of their future. So this might mean sharing examples of careers where AI is an important part of it. It might mean showing them how to critically assess AI generated content, helping them find the errors in the AI generated content so that when later on they have to do that on their own, they're able to do it. And then reflecting on the ways they've used AI that were most successful so that they can learn to use it even more successfully in the future. So I want to take us to the next section now and get hands-on with some of these tools in the time that we have left. So I think it's really important that we don't just talk to students about how to use AI, but we give them hands-on experience using it in our classrooms. We know that students learn to do something better by doing it. And we also know that they're more engaged when we give them tasks that are relevant to their lives. I'm lucky that I get to teach science, a subject that has a lot of relevance to their lives. I'm not sure that I could maintain such a positive culture if I was teaching something that where I had to work a lot harder to make it relevant to students. So I give a lot of credit to you English teachers and history teachers out there, because boy, I don't know if I had to teach students about some of your subjects, how I would make it relevant. And when I see you all doing it so well, I'm really amazed by that. So the last thing is that we have to be consistent with our students and give them tools that are structures that help them to build these ethical habits. So here's an example. You have a student that comes to you and they like, I don't need to learn how to use AI right because it doesn't matter for my job. It doesn't matter if I learn to be ethical about my use of AI. So if you have a moment and you have a window open on your computer, if you can do that on the device you're working on, I challenge you to go ahead and open up a ChatGPT window or Claude or Gemini or whatever AI chatbot you prefer, because here's a situation where we can use AI to help us teach students to use AI better. It's like layers on an onion, right? Struggling to connect students to AI skills in their particular career interests is a common problem that we have. And if we ask ChatGPT to help us out, we can give it this simple prompt. What are several reasons that a blank might need to use AI tools ethically? And I'm going to challenge you to pick the most obscure career that you can think of, the one that has the least amount of connection to AI. And I'd like you to ask the chatbot to make a connection between between that career path and AI. Jackie, I see that you've had very little experience with it. That's great. You can actually just go to chatgpt.com, create an account very quickly. Once you've got an account, it looks just like a messaging app that gives you a little blank to type things into. It's really straightforward, I promise. So if you've got the means to do it right now, I'd welcome you all to type in this particular prompt. And let's see, when you plug in a particular career, what the AI chatbot tells you. So if you all don't mind, if you do this on your own, go ahead and paste in some of the output. Tell us what career you chose and tell us one or more of the ways that the chatbot told you it could be connected. So I see that Courtney's sharing with us dog walker, right? And she says that a dog walker needs to use AI because AI is a part of a lot of these automated scheduling tools. That's great. AI powered tracking apps, right? These are definitely connections between AI and these careers. Oh yeah, scheduling and workload distribution for the trash collector. That's great. I'm going to advance the slide here and show you one other example that I received. I plugged in construction worker because I have lots of students who that's their career plan right now. They want to be working in the construction field. And I asked the chatbot, why would a construction worker need to use AI tools ethically? And it told me, as you can see on the screen here, that there are lots of AI tools around safety management and things like that, where the students have to learn when they're adults to use them ethically so that they can be safe. It also mentioned privacy, which some of you guys pointed out is something that can affect all of our students. Fairness and non-discrimination is something that it said construction workers need to be dealing with because AI is used in the hiring process. Dolphin trainer, Colby, I love it. I would never have thought a dolphin trainer would have to worry about AI, but look at that. And you can see some of the same headlines there, right? Data privacy again, transparency and accountability. So there are some common themes. So now think about how you could take these common themes and make them into ethical AI lessons in your classroom, and then connect them to these various careers so that your students realize the lessons you're teaching them are not just busy work, but actually things they're going to need for their lives. All right. Feel free to keep dropping in your examples here. Audra, I love the one with the plumber. Pricing, what a cool idea. I'm going to keep things going because I've got some more interactive stuff coming up, and I really want you all to have a chance to do this before we run out of time together. So when it comes to my classroom, I also do some AI activities with my students that help teach them the best ways to use AI. The first one I do sometimes is called hallucination hunt. Now, we've all talked about the fact that AI can sometimes generate facts that are not really facts. AI researchers call these hallucinations. So basically, the AI uses patterns it sees in its training data, so things it's seen online, and it generates new information that is sometimes not accurate. You may have heard that about a year ago, there was a lawyer who submitted a brief for court that cited some cases, some legal cases that did not exist. They were invented by the chatbot, and he didn't fact check them, and he got in a lot of trouble as a result. I'm sure there are tons of other examples that we can all think of. I turn this into a fun activity with my students. I give them an example of an AI generated output that I know has some mistakes in it. And then they work either alone or in teams to fact check what the AI has created. Not only does this reinforce the idea that there's going to be mistakes there, but it also makes them understand that this fact checking is an important part of their use of AI. So they work either in the classroom with textbooks and their notebooks, or I let them go online and do Google searches, and they try to find what's inaccurate in the AI generated content. That's called hallucination hunt. And by the way, at the end of today's session, I'm going to give you a link to a Google folder full of these ideas and others, including all the documents that I used with students. So don't feel like you have to write things down or take pictures. We're going to give it all to you at the end. The next fun game that I play with my students is called Man or Machine. I give them a human-generated piece of text and an AI-generated piece of text, and we go through it and try to figure out what the differences are. And for an extra twist, I don't tell them which one is AI-generated. I let them read the two and have them try to decide which one came from the AI. Along the way, sometimes I learn what they think AI-generated content looks like, which sometimes gives me some clues I can use when I'm having those tough conversations with a student who I think has used AI. So there's a lot of memes going around online about how certain words show up more commonly in AI-generated content. Now, as the AI gets more advanced, you'll see less of those patterns happening, but definitely a fun game. My kids always enjoy it. And it's funny how they get really invested in their vote and their choice of which one is the AI-generated one. Another fun game I like to play with my students around AI, I call it quick code. This is where I have students come up with an idea for a game or something they want to do, and then the AI can actually generate really simple code for you. This can be done for generating websites or small applications. You can take it as far as you want. If your students are learning code, you can use this as a way for them to kind of kickstart their learning. But sometimes I use it just to show students that in the future, the idea of coding will become a lot more integrated into a lot of other fields because AI tools will help more of us learn how to code or to generate code. But you're still going to have to understand the underlying rules of computer code in order to be able to create really good quality code. All right, a couple more of these I want to talk about. Students often come to me in eighth grade thinking they know how to study when they really don't. And so I show my students how to take what we're learning about and feed it into the chatbot and ask the chatbot how they should study. And what they learn is that there are lots of techniques out there that they didn't even know about that the chatbot will recommend. And oftentimes that'll give them some ideas for a way to study that really clicks for them. Another strategy or fun game that we play is when we're working on something in class, we'll take a day and I'll require that they give their work to an AI chatbot and ask it for advice on how to make it better. The idea here is I want them to feel comfortable doing that because that's going to be a part of their professional lives in the future. Now, of course, it has to be an assignment where that kind of AI use is appropriate. So given this list of ideas that I've just shared with you, Carrie's going to drop them in the chat. Are there any that I just mentioned that you feel like you might use in the very near future, maybe even next week in your own classroom? So again, we got the hallucination hunt where you try to find the mistakes the AI made. Manner machine, where you have to figure out which one's AI generated, which one's human generated. Quick code, where they generate computer code with the AI. Learn to learn is where they get advice for how to study using AI. And then mirror, mirror, which is where they get feedback from AI about their work. I love it. Sounds like, ooh, Courtney, that's a nice twist. Requiring that they have evidence to back up. It's like show me the receipts, essentially, right? You told me that something was wrong in the AI. Tell me why it's wrong. That's great. It's an important skill for them to have. Awesome. So it sounds like these have clicked for a lot of you, and I really appreciate that. Again, you're going to get copies of all this before you leave, so you'll have a way to look back on this, and you can always reach out to me if you have questions, or if you want to share how you've used any of these strategies in your classroom. All right, I want to move into a little bit of wrap up here because I want to make sure we have time to answer questions. The documents that I'm going to share with you in just a few seconds here are the following. So I want to show you what they look like. The first one is a document I use online for students to document how they've used AI. I tell my students, if you use AI and you tell me you've used AI, then you'll never get in trouble for cheating. Now, I might send back your work and tell you that it has to be more of your words and less of the AI, but you'll never get in trouble for cheating if you are honest in how you use the AI. And a critical part of that is giving them a way to show you how they used AI. So this document will be shared with you. Feel free to change it however you like. I think it's a great starting point for a lot of what we want to do in our classrooms. It basically just walks students through the process of writing a prompt, putting it into the AI, getting output, and then fact checking the output, making changes to it, and then documenting all those steps so that you see what they did and what the AI did. The second document that I'm going to share with you is about brainstorming. So when I ask students or encourage them or just allow them to get ideas from an AI, I want them to keep track of the AI, the ideas that the AI generated, so that there's a clear line between what it did and what they're going to do. And then finally, there's a little ethical considerations lesson that I do with my students when I'm first introducing AI tools to them, and it forces them to think about the ethics of AI. So that one's also shared with you. There's a QR code on your screen, as well as a link on your screen and in the chat that you can use that allows you to go into this folder and you can make copies of any of these and change them. There's also a one-pager in there that summarizes the strategies and the techniques that we've talked about today. I know some of us like a piece of paper to look at, to write on, and you can definitely print out that one-pager and use it in that way. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a few more seconds. And remember, the link is also in the chat where you can access it. You're able to view any of them that you want. And if you want to make changes to it, just make a copy through Google and you can change it however you like. So before we open the floor to questions, I would like to ask you guys what may seem like a pie in the sky question. If anything was possible, perfect world, how would you use AI with your students? So go ahead and use the chat and tell us if you had no restrictions, whether they be financial, ethical, rules in your building, if you could do anything you wanted to, how would you use AI with your students? I like that a lot, Julie. And I like that you said writing style because I feel like we want students to learn to write, but that idea of style is a thing that really takes a lot of tweaking and it can be really hard. And Jackie, I love the idea of brainstorming. Yeah, to me, that's the most power, right? Is having a thought partner that comes up with ideas with you. Ooh, Rob, that's fantastic. Yeah, we didn't even get into the photo or image generation and video generation and music generation apps, but there are some amazing things out there that you can do with AI. Awesome. Oh, Tracy, I love the idea of it being part of the 3D printing process. That's really cool. Oh, and John, feedback. What a great idea, especially when it's a whole portfolio. Having them get feedback. One of the things that you can do with an AI chatbot after you've used it for a little while, because it starts to learn about you, is ask a chatbot what it knows about you or what it thinks about you. Or the other day, I asked my chatbot that I use the most to roast me, and it was hilarious. It identified all the things that I didn't realize about myself. These are fantastic ideas, and thank you all for sharing them. I'm really grateful for that. So here's what we'd like to do to kind of wrap things up. We're going to go straight to the final slide here. First of all, as was mentioned a little bit earlier by Tracy, I recently published a book that was full of ideas like these, but focused on teacher use of AI. So if this has gotten you interested and you want to play around, like Jackie said, maybe you haven't had a lot of experience with these tools, pick up the book. You can buy it on Amazon. It's called 50 AI Prompts for Teachers. It has literally 50 different prompts that you can use to help build teaching materials that you can use in your classroom. I do think it's really important that we as teachers get comfortable with these tools before we introduce them to our students. That lets you have a little bit more confidence when you're working with them. And I could not be more excited to announce that our next Not Your Average PD session is going to be hosted by Eric Eaton, and it is the most perfect second course to the appetizer that I've just served up for you all. Because we know that in order to avoid all these problems with AI, we're going to have to shift some of the way that we teach. And we know that one of the best ways to make assignments hard to be cheated on through AI is to make them more involved, more authentic. Eric is going to be talking about the ways that he uses PBL, problem-based learning, or project-based learning with social studies students, history students. And his ideas are fantastic. And I'm excited for you to learn from him. So if you've enjoyed what you've learned from me here today, please go out and sign up for his session coming up next month.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And as Paul has on the screen the QR code for the session feedback, I've also dropped the link into the chat. We really do look at this feedback and pay attention to it and adjust our programming based on that feedback. So if you get a chance, please drop your thoughts in there and let us know what you enjoyed about tonight's session, what could have made it better, and also if you have ideas for future Not Your Average PD sessions. We are really open to those, and we're excited to have some new innovative ideas to share with others. So thank you all for joining us. We did record this session. We will be sending that out to all of you afterwards. So if you came in late or your internet dropped or whatever, we'll have it recorded for you and share that out to you. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.